It will be remembered as the flood of 1994, the worst natural disaster ever to strike the state of Georgia. It began as a tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico. Alberto was its name, and in its wake, it left much of the southern part of this state underwater. The storm moved into Georgia early in July. It stalled over the state, dumping inch after relentless inch of rain. The Flint River and the Ocmulgee River, along with countless smaller streams, swelled over their banks and soon covered thousands of acres of woodlands and farm fields. The water swept through town after town, flooding houses, stores, and churches. Roads and bridges quickly became impassable. Communities lost water, power, and telephone service. In many places, people were completely cut off from food, from medicine, and from emergency supplies. In Americus, 21 inches of rain fell within 24 hours. In Newton, virtually every building was flooded. In Montezuma, the entire business district was underwater. In Smithville, the streets looked like raging rivers. In Albany, the Flint River cut the city in two, making travel across town impossible, except by air. The first flooding occurred in Clayton County, just south of Atlanta. But it was downstream that the real crisis developed. On Wednesday, July 6th, with the floodwaters rising, Governor Zell Miller declared a state of emergency. The Georgia State Patrol began warning motorists to stay home and stay off flooded roads. GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, called the Department of Natural Resources with a request for help in Macon. 25 law enforcement officers were needed to provide assistance to that city. The following day, DNR provided 12 more people to assist the GBI and local police in Montezuma and Oglethorpe. DNR also sent units to Sumter and Crisp counties.
This is, in my opinion, the greatest natural disaster that's ever hit the state of Georgia. And Governor Miller has directed all state agencies to respond, that we have no higher priority.
As the flood moved south, we started moving south with it. In the Department of Natural Resources, most of our law enforcement officers and fishery biologists and technicians work out of boats on a regular basis. They all reacted quickly to provide help in these life-threatening situations.
By late Thursday, with the waters rising rapidly, DNR had hundreds of people working around the state. Many of them were concentrated in Albany, where thousands of residents were forced out of their homes.
How's look down there?
It's awful.
You ever seen anything like this?
Never, ever.
During the night, more than 150 people had to be evacuated from Albany neighborhoods. By this time, the Flint River was in full flood stage, and the only way out was by boat. DNR supplied the boats and the people to run them all night long.
Get one DNR helicopter to pick them up.
You go to a house and try to talk people into leaving. They wouldn't leave the first time you went. You'd have to try to go back after the water was up a foot or so more, whatever, and talk to those folks and attempt that maybe they would see that at that point in time they needed to get out and get what they could out and go, or some that even after that point refused to go, and we haven't been able to get back in there to them to check with them again. Some of the situations are very devastating. I've lived here all my life, and I've never seen it get to this point.
It was chaotic. It was frantic, folks hollering for help and trying to get to them and cars trying to get out and flooding out, and the water was rising so fast, and I think people were trying to salvage what they could, and got caught by the swift rising water where the house may have been dry, and an hour later it wasn't, and they were cut off.
By Friday morning, July 8th, the city of Albany was divided by the Flint River. Traveling from one side of the city to the other meant a 2 to 3 hour trip on the ground. As boat evacuation and rescue continued, DNR helicopters shuttled emergency workers and supplies back and forth across the river. By the end of the flood, they would have logged more than 175 hours in the air and transported more than 2,000 people, most of them essential emergency workers. One community DNR's helicopters helped was the small town of Newton, south of Albany. When Newton was partially cut off by the floodwaters, many residents were forced from their homes, and local churches provided food for the homeless and for the people working to help them.
A church this small, supported by surrounding churches, can be serving 2,800 meals a day. I mean, that is just a massive undertaking. And that's the kind of coming together that's going to make Georgia survive this flood and be a better place for it. We have 250 personnel and 175 boats here with the Department of Natural Resources. There are several hundred state troopers here. There are National Guard people here. All of the fire departments, police departments locally have been mobilized. They're doing an outstanding job. There have been too many rescues to count. It's all gone for the most part very, very well. We also have operations up on Lake Blackshear where we're trying to make sure people stay off that lake as it recedes. We also are down in the Newton, Georgia area, also down in Bainbridge, and we have personnel at all those locations.
Through the weekend, the floodwaters kept Albany in their grip. On a tour of some of the hardest hit areas, DNR Corporal Jeff Swift described what he saw.
It doesn't look too bad until you realize it's a 2-story house and the whole bottom floor is underwater. There are a lot of houses up here that are completely submerged, all but the roof. As we're traveling through these areas, we see cars with just roofs and antennas that are stuck up where they've been parked in people's yards. People didn't have time to get them out. There's floating propane gas tanks. We're having so many different things go on at the same time that nobody really knows what kind of danger that's going to have in the long term or the short term.
It's not very healthy out there at all. The smell is a good indicator of that. Our department has cautioned all of the officers extremely about, getting just their hands in the water, getting the water on them. Every boat is equipped with Clorox and water mix, as well as alcohol and peroxide to wash hands off with. And anybody coming back into their house or what have you, just a small cut could become something very serious being around this water.
Under these circumstances right here, we're not allowing any boat traffic out here, period. Right now, your life, by virtue of being out here, is in danger, just like our lives are. But you're going to have to load up and get it out of here, okay?
A few days after the Flint River crested in Albany, the focus of rescue and relief efforts began to shift. The crisis of saving people trapped by the rising water had passed, but many dogs and cats had been left behind. And by Monday, DNR had rescued more than 500 pets.
These streets in Albany look more like the canals of Venice, Italy. Instead of long, narrow boats pushed with poles by gondoliers, Albany has the State Department of Natural Resources navigating these former streets. When they're not rescuing people who stayed too long or got trapped in their homes, the DNR is helping animals who are stranded in these muddy waters.
Yesterday, we recovered approximately 350. Today, we've recovered around 20 things have been slow today. We're just mainly going back through here now and making sure we didn't leave any. Most of the animals are definitely wet. They're scared, they're hungry. We're finding them on rooftops where some of the water has already completely covered the houses to the tops of the roof. We're finding them in trees. We're finding them on tires, on top of vehicles, anywhere that they can get and stand.
With people out of their homes and entire neighborhoods deserted, security patrols had to be set up to prevent looting.
Garnett County Sheriff's officers are teaming up with Georgia Department of Natural Resources Rangers to patrol the homes that flooded early last Thursday morning. The Rangers have the DNR boats to move the deputies around.
Over the next several days, the waters began receding, and teams of DNR and local law enforcement officers began the grim task of going house to house, searching for survivors and bodies. By Thursday, July 14th, 1 week after the Flint River hit full flood stage, residents were able to begin re-entering their homes. But before they returned, every house in every flooded neighborhood was checked to make sure it was safe.
We comprised our teams, as you know, of Albany police officers, out-of-town law enforcement, and your DNR people in the ATVs, which are fantastic. We hit in all parts of the city, 4 areas simultaneously. We went house to house. We recorded the numbers. As you know, this is day entry 1, re-entry. We had 128 people, 40 of your officers in that, just in that. And during that first day, we cleared 1,657 homes. We completely cleared this out. We did half of this section here. Down here in the Radium Springs area, we were able to get out about 60% of it. And we're only able to get to the fringes here. This is the hardest hit, most damaged areas, you know. Day 2 re-entry, we increased your manpower.
And brought in an additional 50 units, all equipped with ATVs, because at that point we had realized that this thing had moved from a water operation essentially to a land operation. And that's when we really started utilizing these all-terrain vehicles and found that they were very effective.
We went from 30 of those to 145. I would have never imagined in my life that we could have worked like this. We're not prepared to work in this type of stuff.
Right.
We're street officers, but this is badness down in here. And without those and your men's ability to get in and out of stuff like that, I don't know what we'd do.
I just got back from this location. I've been down there with the sheriff, and you know, we're working closely with him and all these other agencies, and we've looked at this very closely. It's devastating.
It's unreal. People just don't realize what it's like.
You've got to see it to understand it.
I don't really know how your men are going through what they're going through on this cemetery and this graveyard. That is just some unreal conditions. The things they're doing in there, I don't know how they're putting up with it.
Well, Chief, our people know and are reacting to it and realize that the very people that they're working with have friends and relatives that are buried in this cemetery. And we'll assure you that we'll do whatever we need to do, and we'll be here until the job is completed.
One of the responsibilities related to the disaster that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has assumed down here in the Albany area is the problem with the Riverside Cemetery that washed out. We are very much attuned to the trauma and of this whole situation and how difficult it must be for the families whose loved ones are buried here, and we're doing everything that we can to go about this operation in the most dignified manner possible.
While massive rescue and relief efforts centered around Albany, there were people working throughout the flood-stricken area. The Department of Transportation had been on the job practically around the clock since the floods began, repairing roads and bridges damaged by the flood. In Macon, where more than 100,000 people lost their water supply, the Georgia Forestry Commission distributed millions of gallons of drinking water. At the same time, the DNR's Environmental Protection Division was working closely with the city of Macon to assess the damage to their water treatment facilities. In town after town, EPD personnel moved in as soon as the floodwaters started to recede to evaluate water and sewage systems. Their goal, to provide safe drinking water for as many people as possible, as soon as possible. EPD also inspected dams throughout the state to evaluate how well they withstood the massive amounts of water pouring across them.
The flood was one of the most devastating things that ever happened to Georgia. But I think one good thing to come out of it was to see people who pitched in. DNR did an outstanding job, but everybody pulled together.
I just can't say thank you enough to the men and women of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, to DNR and all their folks that have locked arms with us and are working with us in this operation. And I have never seen, could not imagine more dedicated public servants in a more difficult situation.
There's no way to describe this. This is a 500-year disaster. Georgia has never seen anything like it. The cost of it is unbelievable. The cost in human suffering is unbelievable. The crop damage is unbelievable. The house damage is unbelievable. You think about a typical flood, you see somebody's house, you see a foot or two of water in the house. Here we're talking about water going over the top of two-story houses. Not just one or two houses, literally hundreds and hundreds of houses. It's just absolutely unbelievable.
It will be a long time before South Georgia recovers from the flood of 1994. But recover we will, because we must. And because all of us, governments and relief organizations and churches and private citizens, will all keep working together, helping each other help our friends and neighbors in need. We'll do it house by house and street by street and town by town. And even as we recover, we'll remember the acts of kindness and of bravery and of compassion. And we'll remember how the people of this state pulled together to put this disaster behind us.